showed, for example, that people who had set themselves strict goals, which includes living vegan, were more likely, or to be more specific, double as likely, to achieve their goals than those who had set themselves less strict goals, such as just reducing their meat consumption.
Hi, and welcome to our talk. We're Sophia, Paul, and Kevin, and we'd like to thank you for your interest in our presentation.
First of all, we would like to ask you a question. Who of you has been to the bathroom during this conference and washed their hands there? Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. We will come back to this in a moment.
Second question to the audience. Second question to the audience. Is it off? Yeah, thank you. So, second question to the audience. Let's test our vegan radar. You're reading labels at the supermarket and you see this. Is this product vegan? Correct. This product contains 1.8% beef powder, and it seems like we pretty much agree that this is actually not a vegan product. By the way, this is the actual package of the product. It's beef broth cubes, and you can find the same product all over the world, basically. And if you buy this kind of product, you are responsible for a life in misery of the cows and of cattle and their slaughter.
So, to come back to washing your hands, we are of course very pleased that all of you are attaching great importance to your hygiene, so thank you for that. But didn't we forget about something? Soap is often not vegan, and cheap soap in particular contains animal fat, and the chances are high that also at this conference, the soap may not be vegan.
But soap in public toilets is not the only problem. For example, if you travel by taxi, you are responsible for the wear and tear of the leather seats in the taxi. So each time you're taking a taxi, eventually a new cow has to be slaughtered to replace the worn down leather seat, and you accelerate this wear and tear.
And also, if you travel to countries such as England, Canada, New Zealand, or Australia, and you do not want to be without cash, or of course even if you live there and do not want to be without cash, then you pay with banknotes in which tallow, which is also animal fat, is processed. So you're thereby again directly responsible for the wear and tear of these banknotes.
As soon as you go to a concert with a saxophone, you're supporting the death of animals whose skin is used as leather pads for the key of these instruments. And even if no saxophonist is involved in the performance, you cannot prevent the band's guitarist from using a guitar strap made of animal leather.
And as you may have noticed, we haven't even touched upon crop deaths. So whenever we buy vegan products, all kinds of insects and small rodents are killed in the production and harvest of these products. So if no matter what we buy, and also for our vegan products, animals have to die, can we even justify, for instance, to consume more calories than we absolutely need to survive?
But can this really be said? Or are there good reasons why we cannot compare these situations to just buying a simple pack of beef broth?
When washing your hands, you could argue that you would have to research the ingredients of every public restroom you go to before going there. Or alternatively, you would have to bring your own soap wherever you're going. This is simply far too inconvenient.
And as far as tax is concerned, this is just a bit unfair. I mean, ask around. How many vegans do actually boycott taxes out of animal-related issues? It's perfectly normal to care about the animals, live vegan, and still take a taxi every now and then.
Concerning traveling, the whole claim is just simply implausible, because just because you decide not to travel to a country this has no effect on how many animals really have to die for these banknotes in this country.
When it comes to concerts, you could argue that, especially as a vegan, we are already boycotting so many things. I mean, I think you all enjoyed the open mic session yesterday. Live music is simply one of those pleasures in life that I could simply never give up.
Well, somehow these justifications seem familiar to me.
So something doesn't add up here. In one case, we are clear that these arguments are not good justifications to exploit and for violence towards animals. But in other cases, we use the same excuses to justify our own behavior. If animals really have to suffer and die for all these things, is it too much to ask to never take a taxi again or wash your hands in public again? Perhaps we only accept these arguments if we consider the causality between our actions and animal suffering to be implausible.
If we wash our hands in public because the alternative just seems too uncomfortable for us, we may be acting in a very similar way than people who consume dairy products act, because they see the alternative is also too inconvenient for them to switch to a vegan alternative. So it might be that the causality between the behavior itself and the animal suffering is just not clear enough.
But why do we usually draw this line at a very different place than people who consume animal products? Can we honestly claim that every purchase of an animal product directly causes the immense suffering of the industry behind it?
The three of us think that this causal relationship is often overestimated. For example, if you look at websites like the Vegan Calculator, it is suggested that every day a person leaves animal products off of their plate, one animal life is saved. And by the way, this is our combined time since we have been vegan. But is this really realistic?
The worldwide meat industry is worth about $1 trillion US. So understandably, it seems to us that our single purchasing power could not change this industry. Because between the consumption of an animal product and the farm where these animals are bred and exploited and slaughtered, there are often so many steps which cannot directly be influenced by every coin that we invest. Especially in factory farming, the lack of a single person's purchase might never actually result in fewer animals being bred and farmed. Because if need be, the farm can also just simply sell its surplus production at a lower price, or it will be bought up by larger companies, the residual stock.
However, that's not the whole story either. One could argue that often there are certain thresholds according to which a company reorders less or more products. So there is a chance that a single purchase can in fact make a difference. For example, the largest poultry producers in the United States can adjust their farming schedules by around 900 chickens at a time. So if there were only 899 chickens sold and you come and purchase the 900th chicken, then you are responsible for another set of 900 chickens being bred, farmed, and slaughtered. So in a way, you could say that you have a 1 in 900 chance to cause the death and suffering of 900 chickens. Now you could make the argument that the expected value of this action is the same as if you had a 100% chance of causing the death and suffering of 1 chicken, and that therefore these actions are equal.
But if you accept this model, it nevertheless changes the narrative concerning your own complicity. But even if we take a model seriously that works with probabilities and expected values, most of us don't act accordingly, as it turns out. So to illustrate this, let us compare the purchase of the beef broth cubes at the beginning of the presentation with a taxi ride. So on those beef broth cubes, we've mentioned at the beginning, one pack contains the equivalent of 8 grams of meat, and 1 cattle corresponds to 335 kilograms of meat. So therefore, buying a pack of those beef broth cubes results in 0.00024 cattle deaths, or 24 micro cattle deaths, if you will. A taxi ride, on the other hand, the average taxi journey is about 5 kilometers, and over its service life, a taxi has a total distance of 350,000 kilometers. And if the taxi has to be replaced, then 2.5 cattle have to die for the interior of this taxi if it's made out of leather. And therefore, it follows that one single taxi ride causes 36 micro cattle deaths. Or in other words, more cattle have to die for a single taxi ride than for the whole pack of non-vegan beef broth. And keep in mind that the vegan beef broth cubes are enough to make the equivalent of 6 liters of broth.
But what about our collective influence? After all, we see a rise in products in the supermarket, vegan products and vegan restaurants. So how can we claim that our purchases do not make any difference if we clearly see that the world is changing into this direction?
Whilst that is true, we should not conflate collective impact with individual impact. It is extremely unclear whether any single one of us was sufficient or necessary for the change we have seen. In fact, it is very likely that in all these 3 years, the 3 of us have lived vegan, we haven't actually saved a single animal.
Furthermore, we can only decide to not buy something 3 times a day. So the purchasing power of people who reduce their meat consumption in one way or another exceeds ours by far. Studies within Austria, our home country, indicate that 95% of vegan products are purchased by non-vegans, and 80% of vegetarian products are purchased by meat eaters. This bag here is from Swing Kitchen, a vegan fast food chain originally from Austria. They are very popular among vegans. I think they have around 14 or even 15 restaurants now. However, Karl Schillinger, the founder of the franchise, said that 80% of his customers are not vegan. This means that out of every 5 burgers sold, only 1 actually goes to a vegan person. So even in this proudly vegan restaurant that everyone, at least in Vienna, knows and loves, we as vegans are the minority when it comes to purchasing power.
Factory farming clearly is animal cruelty, but buying a factory farmed product is not exactly the same as animal cruelty. Statements from some activists saying, if you only eat meat once a week, do you also only beat your wife once a week, fail precisely because of this lack of causality. So many non-vegans have never been able to kill an animal on their own, probably never will be able to kill an animal on their own, and many non-vegans are against hunting. And we think that this is precisely because this causality between hunting and the death of an animal is so strong.
It might be possible to be against animal torture and still finance the industry behind it. And similarly, how it might be possible to be against child labor and exploitative working conditions, but still not always thoroughly question the origins of the products you're buying.
We all draw a line somewhere, and this line can be arbitrary. In some situations, we act as if we were the direct cause. In others, we ignore this causality. And are satisfied with moderately good excuses, as we've seen in the beginning. The 3 of us think that we sometimes take this causality too seriously when judging other people's actions. The fact as the main reason why so many people eat meat despite loving animals helps us gain a more comprehensive understanding of consumer perspective.
Most people do not eat meat because they think that animals are worth less than their taste buds. They eat meat because they think what they do doesn't matter. An experiment by Pax Fauna showed that futility, so the feeling of not being able to make a difference in this world, was the most effective and perhaps even most common rationalization that participants used to resolve any moral discomfort with animals used for food. And we might even underestimate this effect because people don't necessarily like admitting to it. At the end of the day, the products we buy don't seem to be that important after all. However, maybe there's one aspect of our behavior that we have overlooked.
In a study by Jessica Nolan in 2008, it could be shown that information about the energy consumption of your neighbors has a very strong influence on your own energy consumption, and that information about environmental protection, social responsibility, and self-interest did not have that much of an influence. At the same time, the participants in the study indicated that the social norms would have the least influence on them. So they really highly underestimated the influence that their neighbors' consumption would have on them.
In an online experiment by Robert Bond and colleagues on the 2012 election in the US, it was demonstrated that simply showing your Facebook friends who have voted significantly increased voter turnout. And in comparison, just showing people informative and general things on Facebook about the voter turnout did not increase the voter turnout by that amount.
In a 2017 study by Kate Ratliff and colleagues, it was shown that positive attitudes towards prototypical environmentalists predicted pro-environmental behavior.
This is a national park in Arizona, which contains petrified wood. And Cialdini and colleagues conducted a study there in 2003. And in this park, they had a sign, as you can see here, which said, "Many past visitors have removed petrified wood from the park, thereby changing the natural state of the petrified forest." And they found that this sign actually led to an increase in stolen wood. So the statement, "many people behave in this unwanted way," was kind of an influence to the people. It showed them that other people behaved in this way. So it wasn't an unwanted way, but it still showed people behave in this way. So more people did it because it also suggested a social norm.
Take a look at these lines. Which of the lines on the right is the same length as the line on the left?
2.
Thank you. I mean, I guess it's uncontroversial, but what would your answer be if the whole room shouted it was line number 1, for instance? So experiments like this, where the right answer is very uncontroversial, but the answers of the others are intended to influence you, they are called Ash experiments. So like Ash the city, but with A. And in these experiments, it has been repeatedly shown that the group opinion strongly influences one's own judgment. So for instance, in the experiments with the lines, 72% of all participants agreed with the rest of the group with the wrong answer in at least one of the 12 runs of the experiment. However, if a rebellious person was placed into the group, so someone who pointed out the right answer, then this confirmation rate with the group, it was reduced by more than 80%.
The data seems to be pretty clear. Social influence is important. Social influence is any change in an individual's thoughts, feelings, or behaviors caused by other people who may be actually present or whose presence is imagined, expected, or only implied. We tend to overestimate the influence of our own attitudes and personalities on our behavior and underestimate the influence that others have on us. This is known in psychology as the fundamental attribution error and can be observed across an array of different experiments.
This is how we typically imagine our behavior. We have an attitude about something, then we form an intention about what we want to do, and then we do an according behavior. But in reality, it actually looks more like this. There's a social influence at hand that really influences our decision and our behavior. But still, actually, it looks more like this. We highly underestimate the social influence, and it is very strong. And the social influence has many different facets and can be viewed from many perspectives. But a particularly important one we want to point out is our conception of what is normal. So the human striving to be normal and to conform to the wider society is, in our opinion, a significant factor why people say that they love animals and eat animals on the other hand. Our approach is therefore to normalize veganism.
As vegans, we are still in the minority, and depending on which study you look at, only up to 2% of the whole world are vegan. And a study by Sonnleitner makes it very plausible how influential this lack of normativity for us vegans can be. When comparing the experiences of ex-vegans with current vegans, ex-vegans were less likely to be involved in vegan groups or organizations than current vegans. And furthermore, ex-vegans were more than twice as likely to dislike the fact that their diet made them stick out, and almost twice as likely to report they had insufficient contact with other vegans. So of course there will always be activists now claiming that those ex-vegans were never vegans to begin with. However, we think that the more sensible approach and to interpret those results and findings are that people are more likely to start consuming animal products again when veganism is less normalized in their lives.
And the significance of what is considered normal can also be observed with meat eaters. Between 83 and 91% of the reasons given for eating meat can be traced back to the so-called 4 Ns. The 4 Ns are natural, necessary, normal, and nice, meaning something like tasty, for example. Necessity, naturalness, and normal in particular are strongly influenced by our social norm around eating meat. It should be noted that in these experiments, normal was less often mentioned than the others. But as shown previously in the study about environmentally friendly behavior, this is a type of influence that we underestimate, that we are not fully aware of, but it still has very strong influence on us.
So normalizing veganism and therefore denormalizing meat consumption seems to be an important aspect of our activism. But how and why does it work? Because collective behavior is really difficult to model. Mark Granovetter presents a plausible theory with his threshold models of collective behavior. When making decisions, on the one hand, there are our personal convictions, which can be weighted differently, and on the other hand, there's an expected backlash that we expect from our social environment. And this is especially strong the more people are in this expected backlash. So according to the model, you need a certain number of people who show a certain behavior before you feel comfortable enough to exhibit this certain behavior as well. For example, going to a demonstration, you maybe need enough people in your inner circle who are going to this demonstration as well before you feel comfortable enough to go there.
Imagine that each person can be assigned a number that corresponds to the number of like-minded people they would need to show their intended behavior. This means a 0 will do what they want to do irregardless of what other people are doing. As soon as the 0 shows their behavior, the 1 will join in because now there's one more person, and then therefore the 2 will join in. Now since there are 3 people, the 2 3s will join in as well, making a total of 5. And the 4s and 5s are added and so on. In this specific example, something like a snowball effect occurs, in which eventually everyone shows their intended behavior. This model also explains, among other factors, why collective behavior is so strongly dependent on our social setting. Imagine a society with a lot of 6s. While all of them would need relatively little like-minded people to show their behavior, they will never start doing what they truly believe in if there are not enough people among the 0s, 1s, 2s, and so on, eventually leading for the society to never show what they actually want to do.
And of course, the number of like-minded people needed to exhibit your intended behavior depends on the reference group, the situation you're in, one's own conviction, and the expected backlash. The opinions of friends and relatives may count more in this example than those of strangers in the same age group, which in turn may count even more than those with whom we can identify even less.
So it is therefore important to be vegan and to communicate it. The larger the relative share of vegans in your own environment, the closer you get to the social threshold. Let's assume that most people are for animal rights and against factory farming and slaughterhouses. I know this might be difficult to believe for you, but there are actually studies that show that. The individuals may try to explain their behavior in terms of factors such as social norms, meaning thoughts like, others also eat animal products, so why shouldn't I do it? And due to a lack of perceived causality, meaning thoughts like, if I don't buy this product, it doesn't change anything. For this, reaching a threshold is enormously important and has the potential to trigger a kind of snowball effect in society, which ultimately everyone gets carried away with.
But not only collective behavior can be explained this way. Another recognized model about individual behavior is the theory of planned behavior developed by Eisen. We often assume that our attitude is all that matters for our behavior, but Eisen explains that there are at least 3 essential factors, of which attitude is only one. Both our subjective norm, meaning our beliefs of what other people think of our behavior, as well as our perceived behavioral control, meaning how difficult we think a behavior change would be, play an essential role in what we do.
While doing activism and communicating with non-vegans, we often put a focus on changing attitudes towards the given issue, so meaning consumption and the animal industry. But as a movement, we still put too little emphasis on the other 2 factors, so subjective norm and perceived behavioral control.
But then, of course, the question kind of arises, why should we be completely vegan all of the time and not just vegan as long as no one else is watching us? All these aspects show why the social perception of our vegan existence plays an important role. But yeah, why should we not eat a piece of meat once in a while when we are alone and no one is watching us? The consistent avoidance of all products traditionally considered non-vegan, whether that is causally justified or not, doesn't only have an impact on the people who see us eating it, but also has a great impact on ourselves and how we perceive ourselves as vegan or non-vegan. Under certain circumstances, the fact that we consistently live vegan is more influential for other reasons than the mere fact that we just simply do not buy animal products.
In the previously mentioned study by Faunalytics, ex-vegans were more than 3 times as likely to not see their diet as part of their identity when compared to current vegans. And additionally, the study found that those who did not identify with veganism were twice as likely to discard their vegan diet than those who did identify with veganism. The importance of such a social identity has been demonstrated by Carfora et al. 2019 and Sparks and Gundry in 2006, amongst others. In these studies, identifying as quote-unquote health conscious or green was shown to have a positive impact on consumption of animal products and organic products. Of course, attitudes and social norms were factored out.
We assume that one is more likely to identify themselves with a community if they follow the publicly communicated values and rules of said community. In the case of veganism, this allows for no exception. So this might be a reason why we can assume that people who do not make conscious exceptions are more likely to remain vegan. But there are other reasons to remain stricter and clearer with your lifestyle.
A 2019 study by Gracian, which is also the largest report on meat reduction and the promotion of a vegan lifestyle, showed, for example, that people who had set themselves strict goals, which includes living vegan, were more likely, or to be more specific, double as likely, to achieve their goals than those who had set themselves less strict goals, such as just reducing their meat consumption.
Perfectionism is complex and the data we have is not conclusive, but we assume that perfectionism in the form of high standards for oneself has positive effects, while in the form of self-mortification has negative effects on long-term success. However, our general thesis that a stricter goal is more promising is also supported not only by the data, but also by theories of cognitive dissonance.
We speak of cognitive dissonance when our attitude is not in line with our behavior. To resolve this uncomfortable feeling, we often try to rationalize our behavior using various excuses. Steve Lonen, who among other things has worked on the meat paradox, has repeatedly shown that participants in experiments who eat a snack with meat assign lesser moral status and lesser cognitive states of consciousness to cows than the control group who had nuts. This means that the act of eating animals in and of itself changes our attitudes towards these animals. And it seems pretty clear. The people who see us might be more important than the products we buy.
So, to summarize this, we believe that the link between consumption and the industry is often portrayed and communicated in a misleading way. While you could make a case by referring to expected value, it seems like there are inconsistencies in our actions. And this becomes very clear when we look at examples, such as what we brought in the beginning, where products with minimal animal ingredients, and compared to the actions and services that we never question, such as taking a taxi home, are worse than, yeah, the taxi ride is worse as, sorry. Okay, let me formulate it again. As you already know, of course, the taxi ride is worse than the broth, but the thing is that we consider the taxi ride is vegan, and this is, I think I'll give it to you. I think you got it, sorry.
It does not follow that an individual doesn't make a difference either way. Our social influence is a very neglected and under-detected aspect of our advocacy. While we like to focus on changing people's attitudes, so believing that if this one person understood veganism, they would be vegan immediately, social psychology shows us that this is just a minor aspect of in our behavioral change.
And this very same social influence is the reason why we can allow ourselves the before-mentioned inconsistencies with the beef broth and the taxi. It seems that the main driver behind our impacts isn't what we buy, but how we are perceived. As long as there are social rules around what counts as vegan and what doesn't, these social rules are our main source of influence. This is the reason why purchasing the beef broth might still be worse than taking a taxi.
And what is also important is that they don't just influence the people around us, but also ourselves. We do have a big problem with people abandoning the vegan lifestyle, and a lot of these reasons might be traced back to social identity and community in one way or another. So making conscious exceptions will exclude you from both your community's view as well as your own view on whether you are vegan or not. This doesn't mean we should be perfectionists in every way, but we should also not underestimate how this perception, both from the people around us as well as from ourselves, influence our behavior strongly.
And therefore we conclude that you should in fact continue to buy vegan products and omit non-vegan products. And maybe you shouldn't mind the taxi too much, or at least for now. But keep in mind that the products you buy are mainly important because of the people who see you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.